My children decided I was no longer able to live alone and took me to a nursing home. I felt as if my world had ended, as if I were just a burden to be discarded. But as I walked through those doors with a broken heart, I found true friendship, unexpected opportunities, and a new purpose that made me feel reborn at 68 years old. Today, my life is an example of overcoming adversity, independence, and courage. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I was sitting in the living room, surrounded by the photographs that held every memory of my life, when I heard David's voice trembling a little more than usual. He couldn't look me in the eye, while Emily stood with her arms crossed, trying to look confident. It was David who said the words I will never forget. "Mom, we found a good place for you to live." My heart seemed to stop in that instant. I looked around trying to understand if this was some kind of sick joke. Everything in me refused to accept that my own children, the ones I raised with so much sacrifice, were deciding to send me away from my home. Emily tried to explain that it would be for the best, but her voice sounded rehearsed, like someone repeating something they had heard from someone else. I couldn't answer right away. My chest ached. Every object in the house seemed to come to life, as if begging me to stay. The memories I had built there wouldn't fit in a suitcase or a nursing home room, but they didn't see that. They only saw a 68-year-old woman who needed care, who, in their view, could no longer take care of herself. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I took a deep breath and tried to argue. I said I was fine, that I had my routine, my life. But David, with a heavy sigh, replied that they had already decided. It was as if the ground had been pulled out from under my feet. For the first time, I felt like my own opinion no longer mattered. I was just the problem to be solved. My throat tightened, my eyes welled up, and before I could control it, my voice broke. "Are you abandoning me?" The drive to the nursing home was silent, heavy. David drove without looking at me, and Emily, beside me, squeezed my hand as if that could ease the pain she herself had helped create. As I got out of the car, I felt a cold wind pass through my soul. The building wasn't ugly, but it felt more like a place for goodbyes than new beginnings. In the lobby, unfamiliar faces watched me. Some with curiosity, others with that look of someone who has seen this scene many times. Another person brought against their will. The smell of disinfectant mixed with a faint scent of artificial flowers. I recognized nothing there as mine. Emily tried to smile, saying I would like the place, that there were activities, friends, and medical care available. But all I could think about was how everything seemed cold, calculated, like a business decision where I was the discarded asset. An old man waved shyly at me, and his silent kindness made me feel even more out of place. I was led to a simple room with a bed, a small closet, and a window overlooking an inner garden. My suitcases were there, already packed without my consent. I sat on the bed, feeling the weight of abandonment crushing my chest. My home, my independence, and my freedom had been left behind. I didn't cry in front of them. I waited for them to leave. When the door closed, I felt something break inside me. The doors closed behind me like a sentence. While I was still trying to catch my breath, I heard a light knock on the door. It was a woman in a white uniform with a welcoming smile. "Hi, Margaret, I'm Helen, the head nurse here. I came to welcome you." Her voice had an unexpected sweetness, like a blanket on a cold day. She didn't seem rushed, and that made a difference. Helen sat beside me and offered me a cup of tea. She said she understood how I felt, that it was normal to feel anger, sadness, or fear. She told stories of other residents who, over time, found a new meaning for their lives there. Her words weren't empty. There was a sincerity in her eyes that I didn't expect to find. I remained silent, unsure if I believed her. The idea that this could become a home seemed absurd. Helen, sensing my resistance, just smiled and told me there was no rush, that I could take all the time I needed. She didn't try to force me, and that gave me a strange sense of relief. Before leaving, she left a small flower on the nightstand next to the bed. "A touch of color helps," she said. I stared at that simple flower as if it were a sign that maybe, even in a place where I felt unwanted, someone cared. But I still didn't want to believe it. I rested my head on the pillow, feeling a deep exhaustion that wasn't physical but of the soul. I didn't want hope. Not yet. On my second day at the nursing home, I was still trying to stay invisible, as if ignoring everything around me could make it disappear. That's when a man with white hair and a wide smile approached me. "Hi, I'm Tommy. If you're going to stay here, you'd better learn to laugh a little." His light-hearted manner broke through my wall of silence. Next to him, an elegant woman with a sweet voice smiled. "I'm Sarah, your new next-door neighbor." They started talking to me as if we were old friends. Tommy told jokes about the nursing home food, exaggerating every detail, and Sarah shared stories from her youth, when she ran her own small business. Their natural way of being surprised me. It seemed they didn't care about the burdens they carried. They laughed at themselves, at life, and even at their pains. At first, I remained withdrawn, responding only with nods. But there was something genuine in that interaction. Tommy made funny faces while Sarah scolded him with a motherly look, and I felt the first crack in the emotional armor I had built since my arrival. There was human warmth in that cold space. Sarah held my hand and said, "It can be less painful here when we find company." Those simple words echoed in me more than I wanted to admit. Suddenly I realized I was smiling. It was small, shy, but it was real. Something inside me moved, a forgotten spark rekindled. For a moment I truly laughed. In the following days, Sarah convinced me to join her in some of the activities organized by the nursing home. They were nothing extraordinary. Small group chats, stretching sessions, games of dominoes. However, every step out of my room felt like a challenge, a battle between the desire to remain isolated and the need to move on. Tommy, always witty, would pull me by the hand like a gentleman from another era. "Come on, Margaret, nobody here bites, at least not anymore," he would joke, drawing laughs from the other residents. His lightheartedness made the atmosphere less heavy, as if the collective pain was replaced by an improvised camaraderie. In one of these activities, I met other people with stories marked by loss and resilience. There was a former music teacher who now taught singing to the residents and a man who grew plants in the garden. They spoke of their days without complaint, as if they had accepted their fate and found new purposes. I still felt out of place, but gradually I began to talk a little more, join in small conversations, and even laugh at some situations. It wasn't natural for me to open my heart, but it seemed less impossible with each encounter. My body relaxed, as if the weight of abandonment was starting to dissolve. At the end of one afternoon, as I returned to my room, I noticed something different. I was exhausted, yes, but strangely satisfied. It was a timid start, but it was a start. During a walk through the hallways, I saw a small poster on the bulletin board. "Basic Computer Skills Course, Beginner's Welcome." I stood there looking at those words for a while. I had always liked numbers, spreadsheets, and organization, but I had never really dedicated myself to computers. For some reason, that announcement stirred something in me. When I mentioned it to Sarah and Tommy, they both encouraged me immediately. "That would be great for you, Margaret," Sarah said with sincere enthusiasm. "Who knows, you might discover a new passion," Tommy added with a mischievous smile. I hesitated, thinking maybe it was too late to learn something new. But the idea refused to leave my mind. I signed up for the course that very day. The feeling of doing something for myself, without interference from my children or anyone else, brought a breath of freedom. It was small, symbolic, but it meant a lot. It was like reclaiming a piece of the Margaret who believed in her own abilities. As I walked back to my room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. A spark of genuine excitement. I didn't know if I would be good at it, if I would have the patience, or if I would even finish the course, but at that moment it didn't matter. All that mattered was trying. Maybe I could start over. The first computer class brought back old memories. As the computer screen lit up, I felt a nostalgic shiver. My past as an accountant came rushing back, as if every key I typed connected me to a piece of the woman I used to be. I remembered the long nights reviewing balance sheets, the impeccable organization of spreadsheets, and the feeling of solving complex problems with clarity and precision. As the teacher explained the basics, my hesitant fingers found a natural path on the keyboard. It was like riding a bike after years. The body remembered, even if the mind had doubts. The spreadsheet on the screen seemed like an old friend smiling at me, inviting me to pick up a forgotten chapter of my story. The other students were elderly like me, some afraid to touch the computer, others curious as children. That shared learning energy awakened a dormant flame within me. I realized that my age wasn't a limitation, but a chance to use my accumulated experience for something new. I returned to my room that night feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride in myself. Maybe there was a place for me beyond abandonment and pain. Maybe there was a future still worth exploring, even within the walls of the nursing home. The spreadsheet on the screen looked like an old friend. The next morning, Helen came to me, smiling knowingly. "I heard you stood out in the computer class," she said, sitting beside me. I told her about my old career, how I loved dealing with numbers and finding solutions to financial problems. Helen listened to me with sincere attention, without the condescension I had so often encountered. She looked at me for a moment and said, "You know, Margaret, a lot of people here have trouble with their personal finances. Maybe you could help them. Small jobs, nothing too heavy." Her suggestion caught me by surprise. Me helping others? After everything, there was still someone who saw value in what I could do. My heart beat faster, as if waking from a deep sleep. I thought of the residents who talked about confusing pensions, overdue bills, or small investments. I could use my knowledge for something good, something that would give me purpose again. It was strange to think that, in a place where I felt discarded, someone was seeing my potential. Helen touched my shoulder with an encouraging gesture. "You don't have to decide now, but think about it. Maybe it's a new beginning in disguise." I remained silent, absorbing her words. For the first time, I saw the nursing home not as an end but as an opportunity. "There are people here who need this," she said. It didn't take long for Helen's idea to turn into action. A nursing home employee in charge of purchasing asked for help organizing his personal expenses. I accepted with a nervous feeling in my stomach, but as soon as I started jotting down numbers and categories, I felt at home. In a few hours, we had built a simple, functional budget. The news spread quickly. Soon, a nursing assistant asked for help with her tax return, and another employee wanted tips on how to save money for a course he dreamed of taking. I, who once felt invisible, was now sought out by people who trusted me. Each thank you filled me with a quiet satisfaction, different from any applause or superficial recognition. I was useful again, part of something bigger than my personal pain. With each consultation, I recovered pieces of the Margaret I thought I had lost when my children brought me here. At the end of 1 week, I realized that I wasn't just helping, but also building relationships. The nursing home, once a symbol of abandonment, was beginning to become a place of possibilities. I was rediscovering my essence, a living cell in a body that had been dormant. The sparkle in my eyes was back. One quiet afternoon was interrupted when Sarah knocked on my door, holding a folder overflowing with yellowed papers. Her eyes revealed concern. "Margaret, could you help me with something? My finances have been a mess for years. I don't know where to start." I took the folder, feeling the weight not just of the paper, but also of the story behind it. Opening the documents, I found old statements, poorly explained contracts, and overdue bills. It was a maze of confusing information, filled with numbers and accumulated interest. Sarah, usually so confident, seemed small in the face of that reality. "I tried to solve this on my own, but it just gets worse," she confessed, holding back tears. As I analyzed everything, I realized the situation was deeper than just overdue bills. There were bank calculation errors, improper interest charges, and even duplicate payments. It was a challenge worthy of a professional in full practice, and I hadn't worked formally in years. The responsibility hit me hard. For a moment, I thought about refusing. It was too big, too complex, and I was afraid of failing someone who was beginning to truly trust me. But seeing Sarah look at me with silent hope, I felt my old determination awaken. I took a deep breath and closed the folder carefully. Her case was more complicated than I had imagined. I spent that night reviewing every detail of the documents. Insecurity gnawed at me. What if I made a mistake? What if, in trying to help, I made things worse? Fear was an old acquaintance, an echo of the times I doubted myself after my children's abandonment. However, I knew this was a chance to prove, at least to myself, that I was still capable. Helen noticed my tense expression at breakfast and asked if everything was all right. I told her about Sarah's case and my fear of failing. She held my hand and said, "Margaret, you have experience, sensitivity, and now the right motivation. Trust in that." Her words were like a gentle push to keep going. I returned to work with new energy. I created spreadsheets, organized deadlines, and reviewed contract clauses with almost surgical care. It was like rediscovering a part of myself I thought was lost, a strength that time and pain had not erased. Still, there was an inner voice insisting that things could go wrong. Sarah visited me daily, bringing coffee or just a shy smile. Every time she said, "Thank you for trying," my determination grew. I realized it wasn't just about solving debts. It was about giving her back the peace of mind she had lost years ago. I couldn't let her down. After a week of analysis and phone calls, I managed to identify the main issues: improper interest charges and duplicate payments on an old loan. I prepared a full report and scheduled a meeting with the bank manager. Sarah, nervous, accompanied me. When I explained the errors, showing every piece of evidence, I saw the manager's expression change from surprise to embarrassment. After some negotiation, we managed not only to cancel the incorrect amounts but also to significantly reduce the debt. Sarah looked at me as if I had performed a miracle. It was just technical work, but for her it meant freedom from a weight she had carried for years. On the way back, she could barely speak. When we arrived at the nursing home, she held my hands tightly. "You saved my peace of mind, Margaret. I don't know how to thank you." I smiled, feeling a mix of pride and relief. It was more than numbers on a page. It was the chance to restore dignity and hope to someone I had grown to deeply respect. That experience changed something inside me. For the first time in a long time, I realized my knowledge still had real value, that I could impact lives, even when I thought I had nothing left to offer. It was as if the Margaret of years ago had come back to life. She hugged me, crying with relief. I was reviewing some spreadsheets when I heard a familiar voice at the reception. Looking up, I saw David standing there, elegant as always, but with an air of discomfort. I hadn't expected to see him so soon, much less inside the place he himself had chosen for me. He greeted me with a shy smile and said he needed to talk. We went to the garden, where he looked around as if he were in foreign territory. I sat on a bench, waiting for him to state the reason for his visit. "Mom, I need to discuss some business with you," he began, avoiding my gaze. It was strange to see him, always so self-assured, now hesitant. A heavy silence settled between us. I felt a pang in my chest. For months, the image of him reminded me of abandonment, but now he seemed like a different man, less impenetrable. I asked what it was about, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed deeply and ran a hand through his hair, as he used to do when he was nervous. I didn't know if I should feel hurt or pleased to see him there, needing me. I just stayed quiet, waiting. After all, he was the one who owed me an explanation. His eyes avoided mine. After a few minutes of hesitation, David finally spoke. "Mom, my company is going through a difficult time. A financial crisis that I can't solve on my own." His voice trembled slightly, a rare thing for someone used to being in control of everything. I stared at him, trying to process his words. He explained about canceled contracts, accumulated debt, and poor strategic decisions. Each sentence seemed to carry more weight than the last. The man who had once put me in a nursing home because he thought I needed care was now standing fragile before me. The world seemed to have come full circle. I felt a mixture of empathy and silent irony. Part of me wanted to tell him he should solve it on his own, just as he thought I should deal with my abandonment. But another part, the mother that still existed in me, felt compassion. Despite everything, he was my son. He looked me in the eye for the first time in our conversation and said, "I need your help, Mom." That hit me deeply, awakening an old strength I thought I had lost. For the first time in a long time, he admitted his vulnerability. "I need your help, Mom." I took a deep breath before answering. I could have refused, I could have used that old pain as a shield, but I didn't. Instead, I looked at him firmly and said, "I will help you, David. But this time it will be different. You will treat me with respect, as a professional and as your mother." He seemed to swallow hard at my stance. I proposed that we start by reviewing the company's finances with full transparency. No hidden data, no decisions made without my analysis. David agreed, perhaps surprised to see me setting conditions. The dynamic between us was changing right there, in that instant, and I wouldn't allow it to go back to what it was. As he explained more details, I realized I didn't feel anger, but a quiet strength. The abandonment still hurt, but it no longer defined me. Now I was the one with something to offer, not as an obligation but as a conscious choice. At the end of our conversation, he stood up, looked me in the eye and said, "Thank you, Mom." This time there was sincerity in his voice. I felt an unexpected peace seeing that, even after everything, there was still room to rebuild. This time I was in control. As the weeks went by, my small consulting work spread throughout the nursing home. Organized spreadsheets, corrected budgets, and more relaxed faces became part of the routine. One day, as I was leaving an impromptu meeting with 2 employees, I found Patrick, the administrator, standing at the door. He was watching me with an expression that was hard to read. "You've been keeping the staff quite busy around here," he said in a neutral tone. For a moment, I feared it was some kind of warning. But Patrick just crossed his arms and added, "I've never seen the residents so engaged with something like this." His rigid posture seemed to hide a genuine surprise. I smiled shyly, explaining that it was just informal help, nothing official. Patrick was silent for a few seconds, as if assessing a bigger picture. His eyes, usually cold and administrative, had a curious glint. "Continue," he said finally, turning to leave. However, before he left, he gave me a lighter look. I realized that somehow I had caught his attention. Patrick wasn't known for showing emotions easily, but there was something different about his expression that afternoon. Maybe respect, maybe just surprise, but it was significant. I felt a quiet pride grow inside me. He finally smiled at me. A few days later, Helen came to me with an unexpected proposal. "Margaret, we've been observing your work. Have you ever thought about teaching a small personal finance course for the residents and staff?" For a moment I was speechless. Me? Teach? After everything, I still felt like someone trying to rebuild myself, not someone ready to guide others. But Helen insisted. "You have the knowledge, patience, and a clear way of explaining things. This could help a lot of people here." Her confidence in me stirred something in my chest, a mix of fear and excitement. It was a real chance to turn what I was doing into something bigger. I spent the night reflecting on the invitation. I remembered when I was an external consultant, guiding young entrepreneurs, and how much I enjoyed seeing people gain control over their own financial lives. Maybe that was a part of me that still wanted to exist. The next morning I accepted. We started planning dates, times, and content, all with the help of Helen and Patrick. I felt butterflies in my stomach, but also a strange sense of freedom and purpose. I could hardly believe it. The first class was a challenge, trembling hands, a dry throat, and dozens of eyes watching me. But as soon as I started talking, the familiarity returned. I explained simple concepts of household budgeting, expense tracking, and small savings. The faces lit up with interest, questions arose, and notes were taken diligently. At the end, spontaneous applause filled the room. Several residents approached me with specific questions, asking for personalized guidance. Even nursing home staff, initially just curious, began to seek my services, realizing they could improve their own finances. It grew faster than I ever imagined. Patrick watched everything in silence, but at the end he pulled me aside and said, "You've brought something important to this place. It's not just about numbers, it's about giving hope." His words echoed within me. It was the validation I didn't expect but deeply needed. At the end of that day, as I was organizing my teaching materials, I realized something. I was truly happy. Not just busy but fulfilled, useful, and above all respected. The feeling of abandonment was fading away. It was official, I was back in the game. The work that began as simple volunteer help was now taking the form of something much bigger. Patrick called me for a formal meeting in his office, bringing documents and a discreet smile. "Margaret, we would like you to formalize your consulting service here at the nursing home. A simple contract, but one that recognizes your role." I felt my heart race. I, who had arrived here feeling like a burden, was now about to sign on for my own business. I read every line carefully. The contract was clear. I would have an exclusive space for consultations, defined hours, and the nursing home support in promoting it. I remembered all the faces I had helped, the clients who smiled again, and I realized this wasn't just about numbers but about my identity. I held the pen firmly and signed. Patrick shook my hand with genuine respect. "You've brought something alive to this place," he said. For a moment, I felt as if the walls of the nursing home were no longer a prison, but an environment of opportunity. It was a milestone, a turning point I could never have predicted. I held the copy of the contract against my chest, like someone holding a trophy from a silent battle. The woman who had once cried while walking through these doors was now building a new legacy here. The contract felt like a passport to freedom. A few days later, I received an unexpected visit. David and Emily. They entered the hall where I was consulting with an employee, their expressions confused. They saw my organized desk, the people waiting to speak with me, and the sign with the name of my small business, Margaret Williams Financial Consulting. The surprise was written all over their faces. "Is all of this yours, Mom?" Emily asked, her tone a mix of pride and disbelief. I nodded with a serene smile, showing them the details of my work. David remained silent for a while, just observing the interactions around him, absorbing every detail. His eyes shone, as if he were finally seeing a version of me he never expected to see. I explained how I started with small consultations, how I became a personal finance instructor, and how I had now formalized my consulting business within the nursing home. Emily squeezed my hand tenderly, and David, his voice choked with emotion, murmured, "I'm proud of you, Mom." That sentence, so long desired, filled an empty space inside me. For the first time in years, there was more between us than just hurt. There was admiration, respect, and even hope for a renewed relationship. David seemed emotional for the first time in years. That night, the main hall of the nursing home was decorated with simple flowers and soft music. Staff, residents, and even some visitors gathered to celebrate the official opening of my small office. Helen gave a brief speech about transformation and courage, and Patrick, with his usual formality, acknowledged the importance of the work being done. I looked around and saw Sarah smiling, Tommy clapping enthusiastically, and my children watching from their feet, side by side with proud expressions. That union of different people with such diverse stories made me realize I had achieved something much greater than financial stability. I had earned respect and a sense of belonging. When they called me up to speak, I took a deep breath and said, "Thank you all for believing in me when I doubted myself. This is just the beginning." They gave me a standing ovation, and in that moment I felt a pure, almost childlike joy. The woman who had entered here broken now stood with confidence. When I finished, David approached and hugged me tightly. "You inspire us, Mom." His words echoed like a final seal on this new chapter of my life. I was no longer a burden. I was an inspiration. Days after the inauguration of my office, Emily asked to speak with me alone. We went to the inner garden, where the late afternoon light seemed to soften everything around us. She was wringing her hands, nervous, avoiding my gaze for a moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "Mom, I was wrong. I was wrong when I agreed to bring you here." I felt my chest tighten, but I remained silent, letting her continue. I was scared. I thought I was doing what was best. But the truth is, I just didn't know how to deal with my own guilt. Her eyes began to shine with tears she didn't try to hide. Emily took a deep breath before facing me directly. "I abandoned you when you needed me most. And there's no excuse for that, but there is regret. Please, can you forgive me?" Those words broke through a barrier I didn't even realize still existed. I saw not just my adult daughter before me, but also the little girl I once held in my arms. I held her hand, feeling the sincerity in every word. I realized that, despite the pain we carried, there was room to start over. A silent hug sealed that moment, allowing us both to cry, not from sadness but from liberation. Sincere tears filled her eyes. A short time later, David asked me to have coffee in the nursing home's dining hall. Unlike before, his expression seemed more open, less hardened by work responsibilities and the difficult decisions he had made. "Mom, I was wrong too," he said, stirring his cup as if searching for courage in small actions. He explained how the fear of failing as a son and the pressure of his job made him believe that putting me here was the only solution. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was protecting myself from dealing with my own failures." His words were hard to hear, but they carried a new, almost fragile honesty. I looked at him and saw a different man, someone who recognized his own humanity. "David, I suffered a lot, but you are my son. And I still love you," I replied, a lump in my throat. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence of understanding, of something finally falling into place. He smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years, a genuine smile without masks. Then he said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." Those words echoed, filling every space that once felt empty inside me. He said, "I'm proud of you." That night, I sat in my room and looked out the window, reflecting on everything that had happened. Emily asking for forgiveness, David admitting his mistakes. These were gestures I never imagined I would witness. An old weight, accumulated from hurt and loneliness, began to slowly dissolve, giving way to something lighter, almost sweet. I took a notebook and wrote, "Family isn't about perfection, it's about reconciliation." I realized that for a long time, I had held on to an impossible ideal, and when it collapsed I thought I had lost everything. Now, however, I saw that there was still something to be built. And this new structure was stronger, made of forgiveness and acceptance. Sarah knocked on the door to call me to dinner, and when I opened it, she noticed my peaceful smile. "Is everything all right, Margaret?" she asked. I nodded, my eyes misty but full of peace. "It's better than ever," I replied. As I walked to the dining hall, I felt my heart finally find rest. There was a different future waiting for me, no longer defined by the pain of abandonment, but by the power of a new beginning. Family had a new meaning. With the growing demand for my services, I realized I couldn't continue alone. I started interviewing some residents and even employees who were interested in learning and helping. 2 young retirees, former accountants, agreed to join me as assistants. We prepared a larger space, reorganized schedules, and defined clear roles for each person. The feeling of leading a small team within the nursing home was surreal. I, who had once felt discarded, was now creating opportunities for others to find purpose. Seeing people regain confidence in their own abilities brought a joy I hadn't felt in a long time. We were building something solid with a real impact. Patrick, the administrator, watched everything with interest. Even he commented, "What you've created here is unique, Margaret. It's changing the way we see our own services." His words confirmed that we were on the right path. From a simple consultancy, it was becoming a benchmark for support and motivation. When I finished organizing the schedule with my new assistants, I realized the scale of this achievement. The lost Margaret who arrived here had evolved into a respected and active leader. And that brought me an immense sense of fulfillment. I never thought I would come this far. Tommy, always cheerful, began helping with the more basic administrative tasks, saying it was good to keep his mind busy. Sarah, with her past business experience, started reviewing processes with me, offering valuable suggestions. Soon they became more than friends. They were partners who contributed to the project's growth. Working alongside them was a mix of productivity and fun. Between laughs, old stories, and sincere advice, the work environment became light, almost like a family. We discovered that our differences complemented each other, creating a perfect balance of creativity, discipline, and empathy. One afternoon, while we were organizing documents, Tommy commented, "You know, Margaret, this has changed my life too." Sarah nodded, adding, "Helping you made me believe again that I can still be useful." Their words moved me deeply. I realized that the business wasn't just mine. It was a collective effort, a symbol that even in a place associated with endings, we could still build new beginnings. It was more than work. It was more than work, it was friendship. With the growth of the business, local newspapers began visiting the nursing home to understand how a simple accounting service had transformed into an example of senior entrepreneurship. Reports were published, highlighting not only my work, but also the collaboration between residents and staff. The nursing home's name began to be associated with innovation and resilience. Patrick Proud presented a report showing how the facility's image had changed. New residents arrived motivated, and other nursing homes began to adopt similar ideas. It was a quiet revolution, born from a story that began with pain but blossomed into purpose. During a small recognition ceremony, Helen spoke about the impact of this initiative, looking directly at me. "You've proven that it's never too late to start over." I felt my eyes fill with tears, not of sadness but of gratitude. Looking around, I saw familiar faces, friends, my children, and an entire community that now believed in second chances. It was in that moment that I understood. All of this began at the lowest point of my life, but it led me to the peak of a new version of myself. And it all started with a rejection. The new consulting space was ready. Organized desks, aligned computers, and a sign on the entrance with my name. To mark the inauguration, the nursing home prepared a special event, inviting residents, staff, family, and even representatives from the local press. The atmosphere was vibrant, full of collective pride and anticipation. I could hardly believe all of this was to celebrate my work. Helen handled the decorations with simple, elegant flowers, while Patrick organized the event's schedule. Sarah and Tommy, always cheerful, made sure every detail was perfect. Seeing everyone gathered, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. It was a recognition I had never expected to receive at this stage of my life. When they cut the symbolic ribbon, applause echoed throughout the hall. People who once saw me as a lost newcomer now celebrated my achievement as if it were their own. It was a shared victory, built with effort, friendship, and the courage to start over. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back my emotion. With every smiling face, I realized that this space represented more than a business. It was a symbol of resilience and hope for all of us. The applause filled the room. After the inauguration, I was invited to the small stage set up in the hall. I looked at the diverse audience. Seniors who had rediscovered meaning, proud staff, my attentive children. I took the microphone with slightly trembling hands, but my voice came out firm. This is not just a workspace. It is a space for dreams that refuse to die. I spoke about how I arrived at the nursing home feeling defeated, about the friendships that lifted me up, and about the importance of believing that there is always room for a new beginning, regardless of age. Every word was true, coming from a heart that had known the pain of abandonment and the joy of rebuilding. I mentioned Tommy and Sarah, partners who turned loneliness into partnership, and I thanked Helen and Patrick for their unconditional support. When I looked at David and Emily, I saw discreet tears in their eyes, a sign of a pride I had long wished to see. I finished by saying, "It's never too late to rewrite our story, and today we are living proof of that." A respectful silence followed my words, soon replaced by warm applause. "It's never too late to rewrite our story," I said. The evening continued with soft music, food prepared by the residents themselves, and laughter echoing through the nursing home's hallways. Tommy made a joke about opening a branch of the consultancy, drawing roars of laughter. Sarah hugged me and said, "You changed this place, Margaret. You changed all of us." I felt a lump in my throat, a mix of joy and gratitude. David and Emily approached, each holding a glass of sparkling juice. "A toast to the new Margaret," David said, raising his glass with a sincere smile. That simple gesture carried immense weight. It was more than professional recognition. It was a celebration of life, reconciliation, and courage. As we toasted, I realized how every person present had become part of this journey. We weren't just individuals living in a nursing home. We were a vibrant community, capable of creating, loving, and thriving. It was a moment I wanted to cherish forever. Looking around, I felt a quiet confidence settle within me. For the first time, there was no fear of the future, only anticipation for what was yet to come. And I was ready for any future. A few weeks after my space opened, a reporter from a local newspaper contacted me. He wanted to tell my story, from my arrival at the nursing home to the transformation that resulted in the consultancy. I sat with him in the garden, recalling each step, each fear, and each small victory. It was strange to hear my life summarized in questions, but it was also liberating. When the article came out, I was speechless. There was a photo of me smiling in front of the consultancy's sign, with the headline in large letters, "At 68, she started over." I picked up the newspaper with trembling hands and felt a warmth in my chest, as if every tear shed in the past had a new meaning. Staff, residents, and even my children came to congratulate me. Many said the article inspired them to try new things, even in the later stages of life. I never thought my story could touch so many people, but at that moment I understood that resilience is contagious. The newspaper was displayed at the nursing home's reception for days, and whenever someone looked at it, I saw a different glint in their eyes. A glint of hope. My photo was on the front page with the headline, "At 68, she started over." Soon after the article was published, young entrepreneurs began to get in touch. Some wanted to learn about financial management. Others sought emotional guidance on starting over. It was curious. People at the beginning of their journeys were coming to me for advice, someone who once thought she had lost everything. We organized small discussion groups at the nursing home, mixing generations in enriching debates. They brought energy and new ideas, while I shared experience and resilience. These exchanges showed that knowledge and courage have no age, and that paths can cross in unexpected ways. Seeing those young people paying close attention, taking notes on every word, was moving. I remembered how I felt when all seemed lost, and how a single gesture of encouragement changed my life. Now, I was the one offering that encouragement. It was a powerful and humbling feeling at the same time. Sarah joked. Now you're an official mentor, Margaret. I laughed with her, but deep down I knew something profound was happening. I was no longer just someone who had started over. I was someone who inspired others to begin. The cycle had been reversed. On a quiet afternoon, I sat alone on the nursing home's porch, looking at the garden where so many important moments had happened. I thought about everything. The abandonment, the pain, the friends I found, and the new life I built. I felt a deep serenity, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. The future no longer scared me. I understood that growing older doesn't mean losing relevance, but rather gaining a new perspective. The world may try to push us to the sidelines, but we are the ones who decide whether to accept it or not. The nursing home, which once symbolized my end, became the beginning of something extraordinary. I looked at my hands, marked by time but firm from work, and I smiled. My life hadn't ended when I walked through those doors. On the contrary, it was there that it gained a new meaning, a new breath, a purpose I never imagined I would find. I took a deep breath, letting the gentle wind touch my face. I was alive, present, and ready to move forward, whatever the next chapter might be. My life hadn't ended at the nursing home. It had begun there. Now, I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever gone through something similar? Support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm leaving another story on the end screen that you'll also like, and it will definitely surprise you. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.